Thanks very much indeed, Ben. And really, it feels very appropriate to be finishing a panel by looking at our readiness for the future. And Ben has kindly outlined what we're going to sort of dig a little bit deeper, as he says, into. We're going to look particularly at post-pandemic investment in sport and the growth of the events sector. We're going to touch, as Ben says, on things we've learned from the past and maybe opportunities for growth and development in the future, and whether or not we're ready for the future and better equipped, having learnt from the pandemic. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome three very distinguished speakers to the panel. First of all, in the order that they appear on my list and on my screen, we have Clare Briegal, who is the chief executive of World Netball. And below her on my screen is Sarah Lewis, who is listed as global sports leader, but I know her best as longtime global CEO, General Secretary of FIS, the World Skiing Federation. And also, we are joined and very happy to have on our panel Grant MacDonald, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Sport Tourism Canada, who I believe is dialing in from, I think you said, Nova Scotia. So everybody, very welcome indeed. And I'm going to start with Grant. And really, the question is very general. I mean, you see all the sort of the topics we've got to think about, but I think I'm going to try and be sort of quite focused with you, which is, I suppose to start, is just thinking through the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, and really what that has been like. For your, I understand it, relationships with both rights holders and cities across Canada. You know, what that has been like for you, needing to adapt and be flexible in the event sector, and I suppose where that leaves you for the future and what you think the future holds for sports and the way that tourism will be impacted by major events.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure to be with you and my fellow panelists today, and great to be at Host Cities in Glasgow. The last 18 months has been a tremendous test for sport hosting in Canada and globally. What we have done is we've taken an adaptive recovery approach, trying to figure out how we can be as nimble as possible and be able to build back better. So we had themed our recovery as bouncing back. But what we wanted to do and what we've learned from the research that we've done since the pandemic was declared is that we don't want to go back to where we were. In 2019, sport hosting in Canada was a $7.4 billion annual industry. But we do know that it was also underfunded and in some cases taken for granted because sport events have happened in communities all across Canada, from the local level right up to the international level. And they haven't always had the time, attention, and resources to be truly impactful and to make a difference in their communities, within their regions, and nationally. Pre-pandemic, sport hosting could best be described as reactive and ad hoc. In many cases, there was too little time, not enough information in order to make good decisions. So as was mentioned in the earlier panel today on consistent event impacts, we wanted to make sure that we were evaluating the right things and coming up with that consistent language or terminology, and making sure that we evaluate each event. What we've done very well in sport hosting globally is that we've been able to measure each individual event. But our approach in the future is going to be to try to harness the power of each of those individual events and translate that into a much broader and impactful story about the connection of all events, whether it's all of those events that we host in our cities, all of those events within our sports. That will help us to show the true value of sport hosting and to reimagine what our future is for sport hosting, not just here in Canada, but globally, because we know we can do better And we want to play our role in restoring confidence of our sector, as well as confidence of the public to return to attending events and then ultimately traveling to experience those events live and in person.
That's excellent. I like the thought about sort of bouncing back and a more focus on measurement. Which I just want now to bring in Sarah. And I mean, obviously, with your background, Sarah, particularly in winter sports, I know that the immediate future is pretty sort of interesting. There's a fairly major event coming up in about sort of 60 days time in Beijing. But I wondered whether you might focus on just what you think the immediate future holds for our industry, but also in the longer term, what you think the themes might be, and maybe sort of building on some of the things that have been spoken about during the conference up until now.
Thanks very much, Robert. The conference has covered a vast array of different topics, and it's been absolutely tremendous. And I would like actually to focus very much on the upcoming Beijing 2022 Games, because this is going to be the first big sports event, major event in terms of multi-sports, which will take place after the pandemic. Tokyo really led the way. It was pioneering a lot of the work it's done. And now this is the first major winter sports event. And it really will embrace, of course, the measures required as a result of the pandemic, and these will still be substantial. Once we look longer term, we're still going to have measures without question, but these are the immediate ones. But the opportunity that now presents itself for winter sports is quite exceptional. And the fact is that what China has done very well is that they've implemented the legacy, not as a post-games element, but it's already been up and running since around 4 to 5 years. New resorts, engaging the public, integrating winter sports into schools, and it's become very, very popular. The logistics, the new high-speed transportation train link going from the south of the country and the capital city, Beijing, up to the mountains in the north, where the competitions also will take place during the Games, has been instrumental in facilitating the transportation. And this has really now become embedded itself in society at large. And the government has said that the Winter Games will be a catalyst for 300 million new winter sports participants. And this is absolutely the case. It's well on track. And now it's become a regular part of what society is doing in the winter. So this is the immediate future. As far as the longer term is concerned, I think that what we've seen also during the pandemic is that it's much more about the entire event, not just the sports competition on the day. So we're looking really at using the catalyst, the opportunity of the event to really reach out to involve the whole of the society. We know that the Olympic Games is doing this in an exemplary way, but actually every event, even small events, of course, with modest resources, but it's not only about the participants themselves who are the elite performers, who are really the ones who are undertaking the event for the 90 minutes or however long the sports event is. But it's about exciting the community to get involved and to be really a part of the whole event. How can you do that? Well, it's activities with schools, it's activities with volunteers, it's creating multipliers who are going to communicate about the event. It's utilising the platform to be able to support good causes. And there's so much more and so many opportunities that can really be grasped. And we've seen also the creativity through the pandemic of people coming up with lots of different opportunities. And of course, the athletes. The athletes have got really a great deal to say, and they need to be embraced. They are the ones whose welfare is absolutely the most important on the list. So this absolutely has to be taken care of. But also, they're a great platform. They're a great communicator of and about the event, and they've got a lot to say. And this can be harnessed to really have a very, very positive impact when you see how many followers the big athletes have. So even if it might be a bit controversial, and they might have things that divide opinions, it's all going to be about grasping interest. Then, of course, we've seen the role that sport is playing within politics, within society. And yes, it also underlines absolutely the significance and the outreach of sport and the impact that that's having too. So that's a very, very important thing, to be engaged and to involve this whole spectrum. And sports plays a great and important community role in society. It has a tremendous impact on the health of the population, on the welfare, of the social aspects. And it's just great opportunities for the future. We've learned a lot over the last 12 months, and I believe now that that's going to be implemented in the new events of the future. At the end of the day, yes, we'll remember the 90 minutes, the competition itself, the great performances, the mistakes. But in addition, there is the opportunity now, the potential to use it for so much more.
Sarah, that's great, and it reminds me, when you talk about embracing the athlete and the effects on the whole of society, what a busy year we have ahead of us in 2022, with Commonwealth Games and World Championships, a big football event at the end of the year in Qatar as well, and much else besides. And that really sort of brings me on to Clare, because I know you have been having and have got a busy time ahead, and I just wondered whether you might talk to us about what you as a sport learnt in the pandemic, what is sort of how you are taking those lessons forward, and what the future holds for your sport at this very interesting time.
Thank you, Robert. And it's a real pleasure to be joining everybody today. Yes, at World Netball, we've had quite a busy year in 21, busy rebranding from the former name as the International Netball Federation. So looking forward into 2022, we're heart and centre in the Commonwealth Games, and we're really looking forward to that. That's going to be held in Birmingham in the United Kingdom, in England. And the plans for that are going extremely well. The organising committee, clearly, we're delighted to be able to learn from other major multi-sport events, like the findings from the Tokyo Olympics, invaluable in terms of the measures that were taken in infection control. We were talking earlier in the day about events that had learned that it's really important to think about, as well as the content of your event, but to think about how to reassure the athletes and the participants. And that's clearly the messaging that we're getting from our member nations at the moment, planning ahead for Commonwealth Games. The teams that are qualifying now and that will qualify in the next couple of months are really thinking about what measures will be taken by the host city, by the governments, by the organising committees to make sure that the athletes and all the entourage feel safe and ready to participate. You asked what we've learned. Well, we have been able to progress with test matches during the pandemic, and some events have just started to happen on a continental basis now. So last month we had the Africa Cup was held in Namibia, and clearly we have learned to be able to deliver events within the pandemic environment, and to make sure that the athletes feel safe and that travel restrictions are managed. We have to be very grateful for the support of the local organising committees, the governments, the airports, all of the facilities that all of the professionals that we deal with that have enabled athletes to travel during the pandemic. From very early on, actually, we had teams from England going out to New Zealand, whilst effectively New Zealand was shut down for most cases. So we've learnt an awful lot from that. We've learned to be extremely flexible, even so far as changing our event procedures and our rules around having about always having neutral umpires. So we've now appointed non-neutral umpires for the first time for international test series, so that they can go ahead, so that we can appoint people locally and they're not having to travel. So yes, so looking forward beyond the Commonwealth Games, we then have the qualifiers in 5 regions for our Netball World Cup that will take place in Cape Town in 2023. And clearly that's an essential event for us to take place. It's the key part of with the Commonwealth Games and our World Cup are our 2 key tentpole events in our four-year cycle. So we really do need to apply all that learning, and we will. So we're looking really positively forward. We've been able to bounce back. I love the term grant, so absolutely applies back for netball. And we're looking forward with great anticipation to the events that will happen. And we're just so grateful for all the other sporting events that have taken place that we've been able to learn from. This sharing of knowledge is really, really important. Thanks, Robert.
That's great. Thank you, Claire. And maybe I'll bring Grant back in, because I should remind people to send in their questions. There's a sort of chat function, and I can see one question has already come in, which I'll just jump to now, actually, which I might sort of point towards you, Grant, which is really about government funding. And the point that Russ makes is, he says, in order to host sporting events and accommodate COVID restrictions, which Claire was partly touching on there, that costs more, he says. Should government assist in covering this? Because I think what he's saying is the government is the principal beneficiary. I thought you mentioned to me when we were speaking last week particularly about the Women's Ice Hockey World Championships, which I know was disrupted but went ahead. I wonder whether you might answer that question in that context, if you're happy to do that.
Sure, and it's an excellent question. Thanks, Russ. Governments, as I said earlier, have over a period of decades contributed to the financing of both the attraction or development of sport events, as well as the delivery or hosting of those events. And governments at all levels have a duty of care for all of the population. So yes, they are imposing some additional restrictions that we had to adapt and work around in order to ensure the safety of all participants, as well as the safety of the community in which the event was being hosted. So we were able to do that, but it did change the event model significantly. I think government certainly can play a role, but I think what we need to do is think of different ways as hosts, different ways as rights holders, to be able to generate revenue from different sources and non-traditional sources. So as the previous panel spoke about turning the event paradigm on its head, I think we need to be as adaptable as governments are. So yes, there are some additional costs that are borne by hosts and by rights holders, but we also, I think, have to show the value that we're bringing to that community. During this adaptive recovery phase, we are generating economic activity that is key to the supply chain, that is helping them to reopen, to rehire, or to bring back their staff that may have been on furlough. And that is a significant value to that local economy. What we can't do is just put the entire responsibility of those additional costs on government. I think we need to be more entrepreneurial, need to be more willing to generate those funds from different sources. So whether those be from new streams of revenue with increased access to live streaming of competitions, or getting our message to a much broader audience, which thereby increases the marketing value for our event, then I think we need to be able to be adaptive in all of those areas. So the short answer is yes, governments do have a role to play, but I think that we as hosts, we as rights holders, and we in supporting the event supply chain need to be willing to be as flexible and look at new and innovative ways in which to generate revenue, so that we can ensure the safety of everybody that is competing or spectating at a particular event, while also ensuring that we're able to meet the bottom line. So I don't think that there's a playbook for any of this. And I think that, as Clare mentioned, the sharing of insights, the sharing of knowledge, we are going to make mistakes, but we're all in this together. And we need to find ways with government, with our commercial partners, with our host rights holders and supply chain to come up with innovative ways in which to solve some of these very real problems that we are facing.
That's really super, and I think that's really resonated. Certainly with this panel, I can see lots of smiling faces, people saying we're all feeling our way, really. Nobody really knows. We haven't lived through a pandemic before, and we're all needing to be flexible. But I wanted to pick up on that point maybe about, and maybe bring Clare in, and then maybe Sarah after that, just on this point about being more flexible and innovative, particularly around commercial revenues. And you've all spoken about engaging with athletes, engaging with society as a whole. And Clare, you mentioned something to me when we spoke last week about other sort of, girl-child programs, and also the role of data and using data. And I just wonder whether the future holds some quite interesting sort of innovative tech data sort of solutions for netball.
Yes, Robert, be very happy to speak about that, because during the pandemic, we've been planning for the commercial program for the Netball World Cup, which is, they talk very much about the role of the girl child in Africa and in South Africa. And it's clearly a very empowerment message that's coming through with the Netball World Cup. So that's going to excite certain types of sponsors and partners to come along board with us on the journey. And we're about to go to market for our partnerships there, and it's really good to see the interest in social impact from brands. I think one of the earlier speakers mentioned on one of the earlier panels that that opportunity for brands to associate with positive outcomes. And from our last World Cup back in 2019, we were measuring the impact of the event across all sorts of factors. UK Sport and undertook a survey with the University of Sheffield, and they did publish some really, really good statistics about the social impact of the event. They talked about the pride in the event of the pride from the country, the whole country, in terms of hosting the event. They talked about the mental health and well-being impacts on individuals that interacted with the event. And those are the sorts of things that brands want to be associated with, is beyond their own brand impacts. So I think there's a huge amount of interest, and just saying on the basic commercial income that comes with events right now. I've been to a few live netball events in the last couple of weeks. Started in the Copper Box in London, and also in the Emirates Stadium in Glasgow, and the ticket sales are going wonderfully. They're really bouncing back those live audiences. There's a huge amount of pent-up demand, and people going along, enjoying the experience, buying the food, buying the drink, buying the merchandise. We've all missed it terribly. So I think there is, we've not been able to spend our money on travel, those of us that have been well enough to think about it, and we're ready to go and buy those tickets. So I think the traditional sources of income are there just as much as new opportunities. And I haven't talked about data yet, so I'll just cover that, and then I'll
Yes,
let
please.
Sarah jump in.
Yes,
So
please.
the data side is really important to those new commercial partners, with changes that are going on in terms of cookies and not being able to track through social media. We need to have first-party relationships with our fans, and to enable our sponsors and partners to be able to market through that first-party data relationship. And it's really critical that we do have, beyond email addresses, we have knowledge about our netball fans. There are more and more people are watching netball now. It's available more widely, so we're going beyond our traditional female audiences. We're getting more men involved in netball, and that data on those individuals and that knowledge and expertise is really important. So sports kind of catching up with consumer marketing in that respect, but our consumer brands expect us to have that ability and knowledge and expertise. So lots of learning. We don't know it all. We're very much at the beginning of that journey, and I know some of the other sports can probably talk more knowledgeably than netball can, but I think it's really exciting prospects for all sport. So thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Claire. And maybe I'll bring Sarah in there. I mean, it just struck me that one of the themes that's emerging from this conversation is that sort of necessity is the mother of invention in some ways, because we're also having to find ways of engaging. And this is really the point I wanted to bring Sarah in on, engaging with live audiences with that pent up demand that you mentioned, Claire, but also finding new and innovative ways of engaging with those people who cannot be there. And I just thought, Sarah, you mentioned a few things to me last week about trying to get that balance right, and whether, we are being forced to accelerate and do things that we maybe thought might take 10 or 15 years to put in place, and some of the things you may have noticed coming on stream now.
No question that there needs to be, let's say, something special for those who are coming to the events, who are spending that extra money, who are traveling to the events. Of course, goes without saying, they need to feel safe. But Claire has underlined there is a pent-up demand, and we're hearing about sold-out events in a multitude of sports, which is terrific. But when it actually comes to the opportunities now, because of the digital platforms that exist, really, there are so many ways that can be engaged with the public all over the world. It's not just now about terrestrial and traditional television coverage, but short clips on social media, but also on platforms which are now established and helping also the event organizer, be it the federation, like Netball, the event organizer, even the athletes, to have the opportunity to also monetize that coverage as well, because the traditional broadcasters are the ones who've been investing in those rights. Are there complementary ways? Yes, there are. That's what the digital opportunity is giving us, and reaching out to the public all over the world, and then giving them reasons to engage, creating competitions, creating opportunities to meet the athletes. And it's accelerated over the last 12 months, 18 months, without question. Competitions, voting, your favorite moments, and lots of opportunities that have made much more building up to the event, and then during the event, and then of course afterwards, and dissecting it and pulling it apart. And this has created an entire ecosystem of data, of interest, but it's very much opened up opportunities. We've heard also some fantastic information from the Esports Federation about complementary activities working together with sport, as well as their own events, of course. And these really is, the sky's the limit, because there are certainly now platforms that can facilitate all of this engagement. I think also another great point to add while we're talking about digital experience is actually digital organization. Because Claire, when was the last time you were able to make site inspections overseas? I guess it's been a while. And now there are opportunities with fantastic venue planning tools that enable the possibility to be able to undertake venue planning from distance, and not only planning, but interaction and so on and so forth. So there have been many lessons and opportunities as a result of the pandemic that have accelerated, and we've realized, do we really need to travel around the world every time to do site inspections? Can be important for one or two persons, but I know now with the Beijing Games, what we've been able to do in terms of having venue planning tools that have been exchanged, and also the way it's possible to be able to broadcast what's actually happening during site inspections with live persons, using videos, and we can do it all with a mobile device. It's tremendous. So many opportunities both for engagement and for organisation as a result of digital evolution.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah, for that. And I just thought of you, Grant, while Sarah was explaining that, because presumably, I don't know whether this is right in your mind, but there's presumably a delicate balance between serving the remote customer, as it were, serving people who are staying at home and watching, and doing what you need to get done, which is not only, I suppose, destination marketing, but bringing people to the destination and using sport as a tool to do that. And you said something, lots of very insightful things to me, and you said, and I wonder whether you could focus on this a little bit, is that your methodology for evaluating events is sort of evolving and changing, and you've got much more of a focus now on things. I don't know whether were your focus before, but you mentioned to me the social impact, which we've spoken about, but also environmental impact, which is obviously very relevant to Glasgow and COP26 and all of that sort of thing. But I wonder whether you could explain a little bit more about that, the sort of measurement, because clearly Sarah's point is very relevant. If fewer people are traveling, maybe in the very short term, there's less of an environmental impact, but there must be a balance on your side. How do you go about measuring environmental impact, and what's the value to you, and how do you balance that against needing to encourage people actually to come and spend dollars in your economy?
Excellent question, Robert. And part of what our recovery work has focused on in that reimagination of what sport hosting can be in the future is we used to do a very good job of measuring economic impact. And that economic impact included bed nights or room nights, hotel stays, number of visitors from outside the local market, from outside the country. And I think what we have a responsibility to do, and what really is the power in our story, is to tell that broader impact value proposition that we bring. And the previous panel earlier today, talking about those 5 areas of economic, image, social, sport, and environmental, we've moved from the triple bottom line, which was economic, social, and sustainability, and we are heading more toward the work that Ian has done with ASWAF in those 5 key areas. Now, part of what the next horizon for us is to be able to measure in each of those 5 areas. And right now, today, we do not have good data in each of those 5 areas. So we need to set baselines, determine our realistic expectations in terms of that balance between environmental stewardship and responsibility versus the need to attract visitors. The one thing that will not change is that sport is about competition, and that competition usually means the gathering of athletes and or teams in order to stage that competition. So they will be coming. We do know, as Claire mentioned, that there is a pent-up demand there for people to get out, travel, experience, and reconnect with what was their original social network. The gathering of people to in those shared experiences of sport. And you've seen it with Euro this year. You've seen it in other competitions that have been able to open up the doors and allow spectators back in. But what we would like to do is to work with sustainability and environmental leaders and determine what those right balance points are. Because I don't think it is an all or nothing proposition. We can't say that we can't travel for that competition, because in order for the competition to happen, we need to have travel. So I think it's finding that appropriate balance of our stewardship. And until we get good data and we can analyze that and aggregate it over multiple events, then I think we are shooting in the dark, as it were, right now. And I think we need to get more knowledge in order to make better informed decisions in the future.
That's excellent, Grant. I think I see the sort of clock ticking down. We've got sort of 5 minutes, and I might just sort of go around the panel. Just, I see that there was a lovely stream. I'm sort of listening to you, Grant, but I'm also listening and reading the comments that are coming in from the various people who are listening. And there's a lovely one coming in from Rotterdam, from Wendelin van Leer, who talks about the Eurovision Song Contest and how that had to adapt in 2021. I think she says only a quarter of the audience could attend. So they brought the green room, onto the stage and had all sorts of innovative, event delivery solutions. And I just thought, as it just gave me the idea. I mean, I think I just caught the end of Seb Coe's comments, but I think he said it's a good time to be involved in sport. And I just wondered, in the remaining time that we've got, if we maybe go to Sarah, then to Claire, then to Grant, just for a couple of minutes each, is just whether you would agree with that. It's a good time to be in sport, and if there's an example of something that you think is coming down the horizon that you think is interesting, either in your particular sport or your particular country, that is something to be excited about. And maybe I'll start with Sarah. Is it a good time to be involved in sport?
Fantastic time, and I'd like to go back to where I started, which is the Beijing 2022 Olympic Winter Games, 58 days away. And these will be the first Winter Games in China, 300 million new winter sports participants who are now also at a good level in winter sports activities and eager to be able to explore the opportunities in the rest of the world. The Chinese have invested heavily in the winter sports industry, and this will be a game-changing moment for the entire global industry because it's the snow sports market at the moment globally is 150 million. Well, when you imagine that that's going to be tripled overnight, that is fairly significant moment for winter sports. So everyone else is focusing on multitude of different things. I thought I'd just go down that corridor for the time being, but I wouldn't like to conclude without saying that I think that Host Cities has been outstanding this year. It really has been, and huge compliments. And it's demonstrated once again the value of many positives that we've taken as the events industry from the pandemic, which is the quality of the speakers, the panelists, the opportunities that we've had to have people from all over the world over the last 2 days would never be possible in encouraging everybody to go at their own expense for a couple of days to the November or December delights of Glasgow.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that. And just maybe with 1 minute of comments from Claire and one from Grant, as I see the sort of clock ticking down. Again, I suppose the question is the same, Claire. Is it exciting for you to be involved in sport? And I suppose also, are you ready for the future?
Well, always ready, Robert. That's me. You asked, is it a good time to be involved in sport? I'd say it's a great time to be involved in women's sport. So I'm really pleased that we've got an opportunity to kind of build back in a new way, the new norm, to use all those lovely expressions. And I think we've got a real opportunity in sport and generally just to make sure that women's sport is centre stage in everything that goes forward. So just a plea to the industry out there that we do think in a balanced way about what we can do to help rebalance our sport or balance the sport. There's some great moves going on, Com Games, Olympic Games, all moving in that direction. Not just athletes, but coaches and all participants, and it would be great. Officials, so think about building back balanced, I'd say.
That's great, and thank you for raising those very important points about women's sport as well. I think there's a huge opportunity there in the future for the growth in all sorts of sports. But Grant, I think maybe it looks like you have the final word. Good time to be involved in sport, and do you feel ready for the future?
Well, I have to be ready and we all have to be ready because we don't have a choice. And I think it's a fantastic time to be involved in sport and to build on Claire and Sarah's remarks, breaking down barriers for new participants, new spectators, new audiences. I think all of those things, and the fact that we are having these conversations globally now, which wouldn't have happened as easily pre-pandemic. I think with the shrinking of the size of the world and the connection that we have, then we can figure out the solutions to all of the problems that we face in sport hosting.
That's great. Thank you, Grant, for that. I think we're all sort of looking forward to the future, and I think look, you've timed it perfectly. I think our clock has run down. We've answered some of the questions, but that's been, from my perspective, a very stimulating conversation. And thank you very much on behalf of Host City and the audience to the three of you, to Grant, to Sarah, and to Claire for being so insightful and wise on that panel. And I think it just remains for me now to hand back to Ben.